The scars on Gwendolyn Everhart's stomach made her feel like damaged goods in Redemption Creek, but she kept her chin high despite the whispers that followed her through town. It was 1879, and the Arizona Territory had no patience for unmarried women with visible reminders of past sorrows, especially those who refused to hide away in shame. "Miss Everhart, you shouldn't be carrying those supplies by yourself," Sheriff Peyton called out as Gwendolyn struggled with a heavy sack of flour outside the general store. "I manage just fine, Sheriff," she replied, adjusting her grip on the canvas bag. At 26, Gwendolyn had grown accustomed to doing things on her own. The accident that had left her scarred had also taught her self-reliance. Sheriff Peyton tipped his hat respectfully but kept his distance. Like most men in town, he treated her with a peculiar mixture of courtesy and caution, as if her scarred body might somehow be contagious. Gwendolyn had arrived in Redemption Creek 8 months earlier to take over her late uncle's small bookshop. The quiet life suited her, even if loneliness sometimes crept in during the long evenings. She had made her peace with solitude, believing no man would want her after seeing the network of scars that wrapped around her abdomen, the result of being dragged by a spooked horse through a field of broken glass and metal scraps when she was 20. The bell above her shop door jingled as she pushed it open with her shoulder, the weight of the supplies making her movements awkward. "Let me help you with that, madam," the deep voice startled her. A tall man with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes stood from where he'd been examining a shelf of books. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and relieved her of the burden before she could protest. "I wasn't expecting customers this early," she said, straightening her simple blue dress. "Riley Northrup, madam," he introduced himself with a slight bow of his head. "Just rode into town yesterday. I've been looking for something to read during the long evenings." Gwendolyn took in his appearance tall and lean with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. His clothes were dusty from the trail but neat. A cowboy then, or perhaps a rancher. His eyes were a startling shade of blue beneath the brim of his well-worn hat. "Gwendolyn Everhart," she replied. "What sort of books interest you, Mr. Northrup?" "History, mostly. Though I'm not opposed to a good adventure tale now and then." As she showed him to the appropriate shelves, she noticed he moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. "War injury?" she asked before she could stop herself. Riley's expression flickered with surprise, then appreciation. "Yes, madam, Antietam, but that was a lifetime ago. You're young to have fought in the war," she observed, "enlisted at 16. "Lied about my age," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Foolish boy thinking war would make me a man." The honesty in his voice made her smile. "I have some excellent volumes on the Roman Empire that just arrived from back east. Perhaps those might interest you." For the next hour, they discussed books, history, and the changing landscape of the West. Riley Northrup was educated, thoughtful, and spoke without the usual swagger of cowboys passing through town. When he finally selected 3 books, he asked if she would be willing to order more titles for him. "I've taken on work at the Rocking W Ranch," he explained. "I'll be around for the foreseeable future." "I'd be happy to," she replied, surprised by how much the prospect pleased her. Riley Northrup became a regular visitor to her shop over the following weeks. Their conversations grew longer and more personal with each visit. He told her about growing up in Pennsylvania, his time in the cavalry, and his years drifting through the Western territories. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Boston and her dream of someday writing books of her own. What she didn't tell him was the story of her scars. On a warm Tuesday afternoon, Riley arrived at the bookshop with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something," he said, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "It's not much, but when I saw it, I thought of you." Inside was a beautiful fountain pen with an ornate silver barrel. "For your writing," he explained, "every author needs a proper pen." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Miss Everhart Gwendolyn," Riley said, his voice softening. "Would you do me the honor of having dinner with me this Saturday evening?" Her heart raced, but fear quickly overshadowed joy. She turned away, placing the pen carefully on the counter. That's very kind, Mr. Northrup, but I don't think that would be appropriate. Have I offended you somehow? The hurt in his voice was evident. No, of course not. It's just… There are things about me you don't know. Riley stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. Then tell me, whatever it is, I'm a good listener. Some things aren't meant to be spoken of, she replied, her voice barely audible. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here to listen. He placed his hat back on his head. The offer stands, Saturday, 7 o'clock. After he left, Gwendolyn pressed her hands against her stomach, feeling the raised ridges of scar tissue through the fabric of her dress. How could she tell him? How could she let him see the mangled skin that had made her previous suitor recoil in disgust? Saturday evening arrived with Gwendolyn still undecided. She changed her clothes 3 times before settling on a modest green dress that complemented her auburn hair. At 6:30, she was still staring at her reflection in the mirror, telling herself she should send a note declining his invitation. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock came at her door. Taking a deep breath, she opened it to find Riley standing there, freshly shaved and wearing a clean suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The evening was perfect in every way. Riley had arranged for them to dine in a private corner of the hotel restaurant, away from curious eyes and wagging tongues. He was attentive, charming, and made her laugh more than she had in years. By the time he walked her back to her small house behind the bookshop, Gwendolyn felt a happiness she'd long since given up on at her doorstep. Riley took her hand gently in his. "Thank you for a wonderful evening." "Thank you for not giving up when I tried to refuse," she replied with a small smile. "I'm a persistent man, Miss Everhart." His eyes crinkled at the corners, especially when something matters. When he leaned forward to kiss her cheek, she didn't pull away. His lips were warm against her skin, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like if things were different, if she were whole. Over the following weeks, they began to court properly. Riley would bring her wildflowers from his rides across the range, or small treasures. He found an unusual rock with flecks of gold, a perfect eagle feather. They rode together on Sunday afternoons, picnicked by the creek when weather permitted, and spent long evenings discussing books and dreams. Yet even as her feelings for Riley deepened, Gwendolyn maintained a physical distance between them. She deflected his touches, stepped away from embraces that lingered too long, and made excuses whenever their time together stretched into the darkness of evening. The town noticed their courtship. Whispers followed them, some kind, others less so. Why would a handsome cowboy like Riley Northrup court the scarred bookkeeper? What did he see in her? What was he after? "People are talking," she told him one evening as they sat on the bench outside her shop. "People always talk," Riley replied with a shrug. "It's what folks do when they don't have enough troubles of their own to occupy them. They say you could do better." Riley's jaw tightened, then they don't know what better means. "Riley," she began, her voice wavering, "there's something I need to tell you." He turned to face her, his expression open and patient. "I'm listening." Gwendolyn clasped her hands tightly in her lap. "When I was 20, there was an accident. A horse dragged me through a field of broken equipment. The doctor said I was lucky to survive, but…" She swallowed hard. "I was badly scarred, my stomach, my side, it's not." Riley covered her hands with one of his. "We all have scars, Gwendolyn. Some are just more visible than others." "You don't understand," she insisted. "It's hideous." The last man who saw," she broke off, the memory still painful. "He couldn't hide his disgust. He called off our engagement the next day." "Then he was a fool who didn't deserve you," Riley said firmly. "And nothing you could tell me or show me would change how I feel about you." But fear held her captive, and she couldn't bring herself to believe him. Their courtship continued into autumn, with Riley becoming increasingly frustrated by the invisible barrier she maintained between them. The tension came to a head one crisp October evening as they walked back from a town social. "Why won't you let me close to you?" Riley asked, his voice tight with emotion. "I told you why," she replied, wrapping her shawl more tightly around herself. "No, you told me about your scars." "You didn't tell me why you think they would matter to me." Because they matter to everyone, she cried, tears welling in her eyes. Because they're ugly and they remind me every day that I'm damaged, that I'll never be whole. Riley stopped walking and took her by the shoulders, forcing her to face him. Look at me, Gwendolyn, really look at me. In the moonlight, his eyes were intense. I walk with a limp because a Confederate Minié ball shattered my knee. I have scars across my back from a Comanche arrow that nearly killed me, and here, he guided her hand to his chest where she could feel the ridged tissue through his shirt, a knife from a saloon brawl in Dodge City. We are all marked by our lives, by what we've survived. It's different for a woman, she whispered. No, he countered. It's different for people who let fear rule them, and I never took you for a fearful woman, Gwendolyn Everhart. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and walked away, his limp more pronounced as he disappeared into the darkness. For 3 days, Riley didn't come to the bookshop. Gwendolyn alternated between anger and despair, telling herself it was better this way, that the inevitable end had simply come sooner rather than later. On the 4th day, a violent thunderstorm rolled through the valley, rattling windows and flooding the streets of Redemption Creek. Gwendolyn was securing the shutters on her shop when she heard the pounding of horse hooves. Through the curtain of rain, she saw Riley dismounting from his horse, soaked to the skin and moving with urgency. "What are you doing here?" she called out as he approached. "Flash flood at the lower crossing," he shouted over the storm. "The Wilkins family is stranded, sheriffs gathering men to help." Without hesitation, Gwendolyn grabbed her rain cloak. "I'll come too, they'll need extra hands." Riley looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. "Take my horse, I'll ride with Johnson." The rescue effort was chaotic and dangerous. The Wilkins wagon had overturned at the creek crossing, trapping Mrs. Wilkins and her 3 children on a rapidly shrinking island of high ground as the waters rose. The men worked to stretch ropes across the torrent, while Gwendolyn helped organize blankets, dry clothes, and hot drinks for when the family was brought to safety. She watched Riley wade into the dangerous current, the rope secured around his waist, moving with determination despite the obvious pain in his bad leg. When little Emma Wilkins slipped from her mother's grasp, it was Riley who lunged forward, catching the child before the current could sweep her away. One by one, the family was brought safely to shore. As the last child reached dry ground, a massive log came charging downstream, slamming into Riley and knocking him underwater. Gwendolyn screamed his name as several men grabbed the safety rope, hauling desperately against the current. When they pulled Riley from the water, he wasn't breathing. Gwendolyn pushed through the crowd, dropping to her knees beside his still form. Without thinking about the watching townspeople, she began pressing rhythmically on his chest, then turned him to his side as her father, a physician, had taught her years ago. Water gushed from Riley's mouth and he coughed violently, gasping for air. His eyes flew open, disoriented at first, then focusing on her face above him. "That's twice now I've cheated death," he rasped. Tears of relief streamed down Gwendolyn's face as she helped him sit up. "Don't you dare do that again," she scolded, her voice breaking. The town doctor insisted Riley needed immediate care. They brought him to Gwendolyn's home, which was closest, and she sent everyone away once Riley was settled in her bed. She stoked the fire high and gathered clean towels and bandages. "Your leg needs tending," she told him, noticing the blood seeping through his sodden trousers. "It's just an old wound reopened," he replied weakly. "Nothing to fuss over." "I'll be the judge of that," she said firmly, her fear for him overriding her usual reserve. She helped him remove his boots and socks, then hesitated at his trousers. Riley met her eyes, understanding her discomfort. "Just cut the leg open, no need to remove them entirely." Using scissors from her sewing basket, Gwendolyn carefully cut away the fabric to reveal a deep gash running alongside an old, puckered scar. She cleaned and bandaged the wound with gentle efficiency, then insisted he remove his shirt so she could check for other injuries. Riley's torso was a roadmap of his hard life, the knife scar on his chest, burn marks on his shoulder, a long diagonal slash across his ribs. Gwendolyn's fingers traced the edge of one scar, her touch feather light. "Does it pain you?" she asked softly. Only the memories they carry, he replied, watching her face. The physical pain fades. It's what we tell ourselves about the scars that hurts the longest. Their eyes met, and something shifted in Gwendolyn's heart. Here was a man who understood pain, who wore his history on his skin without shame. Perhaps he could understand hers as well. I need to change into dry clothes, she said suddenly. Will you be all right for a moment? Riley nodded, and she disappeared behind the privacy screen in the corner of her bedroom. After changing into a dry nightgown and wrapping herself in a thick robe, she emerged with determination in her steps. Standing before him, she slowly untied her robe. I need you to see, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. I need you to know what you're truly asking for when you say you want me. Before Riley could respond, she parted the robe and lifted her nightgown just enough to reveal her abdomen. The lamplight cast shadows across the web of scars that crisscrossed her pale skin, some thin and silvery, others thick and rope-like, twisting from below her ribcage down to her hip and around to her back. This is what I've been hiding, she whispered, unable to look at his face, bracing herself for the revulsion she was certain would follow. The silence stretched between them until she could bear it no longer. She began to lower her nightgown, cheeks burning with shame when Riley's hand gently caught hers. Look at me, he said softly. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to find not disgust but tears in his gaze. These are badges of your courage, he said. Proof that you're stronger than whatever tried to break you. Before she could respond, Riley slid from the bed to kneel before her, wincing as his injured leg protested. Taking her completely by surprise, he leaned forward and pressed his lips reverently against the largest scar that curved across her belly. You are beautiful, Gwendolyn Everhart, he murmured against her skin. Every inch of you tells the story of a woman I admire and love more with each passing day. Tears spilled down Gwendolyn's cheeks as years of shame began to dissolve under his tender acceptance. Riley kissed each scar, his touch unbearably gentle, before looking up at her with such love that it stole her breath. Marry me, he said simply. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my days showing you how beautiful you are to me. You can't mean that, she whispered, though hope was blooming in her chest. I have never meant anything more. He rose to his feet, grimacing at the pain in his leg but not letting it stop him from taking her hands in his. I love you, scars and all, say you'll be mine. Yes, she breathed, scarcely believing her own courage. Yes, I'll marry you. Their wedding took place on a bright spring day in 1880. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, curious to see the unusual couple. Gwendolyn wore a dress she had designed herself, one that neither hid nor emphasized her scars, but simply acknowledged them as part of her. As they exchanged vows in the small church, Gwendolyn felt a peace she had never known. This man who stood before her saw her completely, her strength, her fears, her scars both visible and hidden, and loved her without reservation. The wedding reception was held in the town square. As music played and townsfolk danced, one of the local busybodies, Mrs. Henderson, approached the couple with a pinched smile. Such an interesting match you two make, she said, her eyes lingering on Gwendolyn's midsection where the outline of her scars was visible through the fine fabric of her dress. I suppose we all must make do with what the good Lord provides. Before Gwendolyn could respond, Riley stepped forward. Mrs. Henderson, my wife doesn't make do with me, nor I with her. We choose each other, freely and completely. He slipped an arm around Gwendolyn's waist. And I thank God every day for bringing this extraordinary woman into my life, Mrs. Henderson's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air before she huffed away. Riley turned to Gwendolyn with a mischievous smile. Was that too much? She laughed, a free and joyous sound. It was perfect. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the celebration, Riley pulled Gwendolyn into the center of the square for their dance. The townspeople gathered around, watching as the handsome cowboy with the slight limp and the bookkeeper with the hidden scars moved in perfect harmony. Without warning, Riley stopped dancing and dropped to his knees before her, taking her hands in his. A hush fell over the crowd. What are you doing? Gwendolyn whispered, her cheeks flushing. Something I should have done at our wedding, he replied loud enough for everyone to hear. something everyone here needs to witness. Slowly, reverently, Riley lifted the edge of her dress just enough to reveal the scars on her lower abdomen. Then, before the entire town of Redemption Creek, he bent forward and placed a tender kiss on the largest scar. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Gwendolyn stood frozen, mortified and yet strangely liberated as Riley looked up at her with unwavering devotion. "These scars are part of the woman I love," he declared, rising to his feet and addressing the stunned crowd. "They tell the story of her courage, her resilience, her beauty. And I will spend every day of our lives celebrating every part of her, especially the parts the rest of you were too blind to see as beautiful." Tears of joy streamed down Gwendolyn's face as Riley pulled her into his arms and kissed her soundly, unconcerned with the scandalized whispers and awkward coughs of the townspeople. In that moment, the last chains of shame fell away from her heart. "I love you, Riley Northrup," she said against his lips. "And I love you, Gwendolyn Northrup," he replied, his eyes shining. Scars and all, they moved to the rocking W Ranch where Riley became foreman. Gwendolyn kept her bookshop in town, but expanded it to include her own writing desk, where she began penning stories of brave women and the men who loved them truly. 2 years after their wedding, Gwendolyn gave birth to twin girls with their father's blue eyes and their mother's auburn hair. As she recovered from the difficult birth, she worried anew about her body, now marked with fresh stretching scars from carrying their daughters. Riley found her examining her reflection one evening, her fingers tracing the new lines across her belly with a frown. "More beautiful than ever," he said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "These new marks brought our daughters into the world. How could I not love them? How do you always know exactly what to say?" she asked, leaning back against his solid chest. "I just speak the truth as I see it," he replied, kissing her temple. "And the truth is, you grow more beautiful to me with each passing day." As their family grew with the addition of a son 2 years later, so did Gwendolyn's confidence. She became known throughout the territory, not only for her bookshop and her stories, but also for her work helping other women who carried visible and invisible scars of their own. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Riley presented her with a leather-bound collection of her published stories, specially printed for her by a publishing house in San Francisco. Inside the cover he had inscribed, "To my beloved Gwendolyn, whose scars taught me the true meaning of beauty and courage. Every story you write helps another scarred soul find their way to healing. I fall in love with you anew each day. Forever yours, Riley." That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Gwendolyn traced the familiar landscape of Riley's scars as he did hers, a ritual of love and acceptance they had practiced throughout their years together. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "That day at our wedding when you knelt before everyone, people still talk about it, you know." Riley's deep chuckle rumbled against her palm. "Let them talk. That moment set us both free." He propped himself up on one elbow to look into her eyes. "Besides, it makes for a mighty fine story to tell our grandchildren someday how their grandfather knelt before the whole town to show everyone what true beauty looks like." "Our grandchildren," Gwendolyn laughed. "The twins are only 8. "I'm planning ahead," Riley said with a grin, pulling her closer. "We've got a lifetime of stories ahead of us, Mrs. Northrup, and I intend to make every chapter better than the last." As Gwendolyn drifted to sleep in the arms of the man who had taught her to love herself completely, she thought of the frightened, scarred woman she had been when she arrived in Redemption Creek. That woman could never have imagined the joy that awaited her, a loving husband who saw beauty where others saw only damage, children who traced her scars with curious, accepting fingers, and a life filled with purpose and meaning. The scars remained, but their power to shame her was gone. In their place was the knowledge that true love doesn't require perfection. It simply requires the courage to be seen, completely and without disguise, by someone whose eyes are open enough to recognize the beauty in your battle wounds. And in the wild, untamed West, where life was hard and often cruel, Gwendolyn and Riley Northrup had found something rare and precious. A love that healed old wounds and transformed scars from marks of pain into badges of honor.